Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? I have Rae Hill here. We're gonna give folks a couple minutes to come in. But yeah, good to see everyone.
Welcome. I'm really excited to get going with this one, but yeah, we'll hang out for another couple minutes, wait for everyone to arrive. Hey there, welcome. Hi, welcome. We're gonna get going in a couple minutes here. Just give it a few more and wait for people to trickle in. Thanks for being here. I'm really excited about this one. This is actually my second time presenting this presentation, and I was looking through it again, being like, oh yeah, this is really good. I'm really excited about it. I really like talking about this. I present on a lot of different types of topics, and this is like something I really believe in. I'm really excited to share it with everyone. And we've got a big group today. I'm excited. I think we can get into a little bit more discussion, which I'm always really excited for. Maybe just give it like one more minute, and then as people come in, they can catch up or not catch up. They'll just miss it, and that's fine. Look at the gist. It is like a particularly cold and gray morning for anyone who's waking up in Montreal, so I feel like people are moving particularly slowly. Okay, well, maybe I'll just kind of ease into this and we'll see who trickles in afterwards. So thank you everyone for joining us. I heard that you are all starting off this cohort. This is the first presentation, I think. Yeah, it's very exciting. It's a really awesome program. I'm excited to be here with you. My name is Rae. I use they, them pronouns. I am the owner and founder of Origami Customs. I'll explain a little bit more about what we do in a second. This is a presentation about my work in the gender-affirming clothing world and also kind of in trans healthcare for 15 years. So I've titled the presentation Supporting Authentic Diversity in Small Business, although the presentation itself can really be adapted to a lot of different things. You can take away a lot of different stuff from it depending on how you're working in your field and your niche. And I think it supports people even in like NGOs and community spaces in a lot of different ways. And I do love for this to be collaborative, so feel free to write questions in the chat. I've got a break in the middle for like a question and reflection period, and I've got one at the end as well. So if you've got questions on the content itself, we'll wait for those, and then we can dive into, yeah, how you would like this to be kind of related back to how you all are working. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm being loud enough and technical's all good? Okay, fantastic. Let's get into it. So I've kind of broken this presentation down into 3 sections, who I am and the work that I'm doing, and then the work that I've done that centers on trans and gender diverse experience specifically, and then thirdly, more broadly, how that relates to diversity in marketing itself. So first of all, I'm Rae. I'm trans and non-binary. My background is not in fashion. It's in sociology and then kind of permaculture for a while. I've operated this company on 4 different continents, and I'll be going into my 15th year in January. It's exciting. My background and experience in doing this is also with mental health disorders and what we call spicy brain. A lot of people have different words for that. So that just adds to kind of my experience in the non-typical world of corporate. And I ran this company for the first 7 or so years by myself, doing all of the sewing. And now I operate a team of 9 people here in Montreal. So the company itself, I like to think, and I do think this is true, we were really leaders in the field of gender-affirming garments. I started this 15 years ago. Like I said, I was very different 15 years ago, but we do custom-made lingerie and swimwear specifically for the gender diverse community, but really for anyone who can benefit from having things that are custom-made. And it's one of the first companies out there that really divided from the fashion world where everything was within a binary of men's and women's clothing. So we say like everything can be made for everybody. We've done a lot of work in the production side of things and also the marketing side of things to make sure that everyone has access to garments that make them feel comfortable in their bodies. And so I've done a lot of work around like how to develop strategies around marketing that talk about that. Everything is produced in our Montreal studio. I've never outsourced anything. That was really important to me. And we have an all queer and trans staff who produce the garments. So really it's a trans integral workspace, then rippling outwards to impact the trans and gender diverse community, around the world. So because of that, I've created really a framework that that structures around supports that are specific to gender diverse populations, both within my staff and myself, and then within the clientele that we work with. As well, we have a majority neuroatypical staff, which plays into how we've developed systems that work for diverse people in lots of different ways. So on top of being a retail store that sells clothing, about 6 years ago, I started a program. This is my sociology background coming through. I was like, I'm not a fashion person. Like, I like what I do, but it didn't feel like it was hitting the heart of my vision and my mission. So I created a network of organizations through what I call my community program. Now we work with 50 organizations around the world to get gender affirming garments to people who had limited access due to often overlapping oppressions. We work with NGOs at intersections of like race, immigration status, HIV/AIDS status. We work with lots of like younger folks, lots of people who are experiencing homelessness, whatever those NGOs are doing to bring products to gender diverse populations that need them. Then we've created these links, and we've been able to give away 500 pieces per month through this network. So I guess this is the big question in this presentation, is like, how do we do authentic diversity in our marketing, in our structures, in our hiring practices, and know that it's not lip service? So like, how do we do it with our values? So here's some of the questions that I really want to start answering, is like, how do we, are we relying on people to educate us about their experience? Are we replicating systems of power in this? Are we playing into stereotypes that we might not be aware of? Have we considered the ways in which people might be benefiting from that privilege, or conversely may be disadvantaged? So these are kind of the things that I have in mind when I'm creating those systems. Not that I feel like I can answer all of these right away, but those are kind of the themes that we're working towards. So getting a little bit into the way that we show up for a diverse staff. This may be less relevant based on where you guys are, how you're working, where you're working, but I'll do a quick overview. And I think it's a really good example of how we can bring like specific supports to a diverse team. See, these are some of the things that I've instigated. We have extra paid menstruation days and sick days for all of our staff. We have a benefits package that's quite above the average of what most businesses do. And that's like unheard of in the fashion industry to even have benefits. We added on a gender-affirming care package, which includes medical and non-medical transition options. We integrated transparency and fluidity for people to update their names and pronouns, both socially and in all of our HR and communication methods at any time. So we often go through and do checks to make sure that we're up to date on everyone's names and pronouns. We do specific community sourced guidelines for photography and the editing of any visuals, because mostly we do work with trans individuals when we're doing our photography, but in other ways as well, we're working with people. We offer a lot of like emotional support and regular check-ins for people for lots of reasons, but for example, people who are shifting their medications, undergoing like mental health crises or small crises, transition-related care, any ways in which people might need a little bit more support. We're really aware of that and build that into the framework of how we staff and support those staff. And we just understand what a roller coaster gender transition can be, because, you know, this was founded by a trans person, and it's just really like baked in. And that also ripples out into lots of different ways that we can create networks of care for, even if we don't have a gender diverse staff, for lots of different reasons, right? So one of the ways in which I think it's really important to work with our, I mean, I say staff, but I think this is relevant for anyone who we work with in our workspaces, is reframing the way that we talk about productivity, because for so many of us, it really shows up in different ways, and we were able to kind of shift the lens on that. One thing that really helped us is talking about how we want our successes to be measured, because, you know, working under late stage capitalism, like we're really moving away from trying to focus on what's the most that we can squeeze out of each person. You know, the people that I employ manufacture garments, and, you know, historically that has been a very like laborious, challenging process where you're just trying to get the most done per hour, and that didn't feel right to me. So we talk a lot about how we set standards and how we set goals for ourselves. And we do that really on a one-on-one basis. Some of the ways that really work for us is talking about like, how do you want to feel? What's your mood at the end of the day? How do you feel in your body after a day of work? And then we use that to work backwards to create a framework. Like I was saying, there's a lot of checking in around like how we want to support people to thrive at the end of the day, but so that it's a valuable, meaningful experience that doesn't burn people out. essentially. So I think it's also important to talk about healthcare on a more individual level, some of the structural stuff. So we all obviously have like a very broad variety of needs that we need to function within this capitalist structure, but we do get to decide how best we want that to work for us. So we really try to encourage ourselves and our staff to do as much as we can to take care of ourselves and do preventative stuff that's going to sustain us in the long run. So we make sure that people are taking breaks and stretching, um, adding in flexibility wherever we can to just get out of that mindset that things need to be done in a specific way. Just because it's like a professional environment, that doesn't mean that we can't be like caretaking ourselves and caretaking others. Um, This as well, like, I'm not sure where all of you are in your journey, but I thought that I would talk just briefly about sustainable scaling because when you get to a certain point above, like, yes, I'm taking care of myself and I'm building my business, and maybe I'm starting to hire an assistant or hire people to help me with my tasks. It comes with a lot of really big ethical decisions that you kind of get there and you're like, oh shit, I didn't know that I was going to be here already. And now there's a lot of values-based decision making that's going to go into how and where you want to grow into your market. So I think when you're starting off, you feel like you're drowning all the time. You wear all the hats, you do all the tasks. And there's lots of resources, like Quebec is really great for that, that where you can start to get support and help. But once we make that jump into hiring others, all of the factors that I was just talking about come into play of like, how are my values embedded in the way that I can employ people, work with other people. Um, and yeah, I've got a list at the end as well of supports that can help you in that decision making process. But I feel like it's important to like talk through some of the things that will go into how you might be able to include more of your values in that scaling up process. Because I think we often feel like there aren't many good options in this world. Um, yeah, I felt like in my industry there was one really easy path, and then there was the ethical path. And maybe you feel this as well. So, I was thinking about when I was realizing that I needed more help than just myself. I can outsource. And then I started researching how clothes are made. And I was like, oh, okay. So this mostly falls upon like the labor of mostly women of color overseas. Like that doesn't feel good for me. How are other ways that people are doing this? How are they doing it differently? And are they making money? We look at internships as well. Like, are we able to pay people fairly for their labor? Unpaid internships are so commonplace now. Yeah, one tool that I found really helpful in making this decisions were a values audit. So going through and thinking about how you want to have an effect on the world, what's a legacy that you want to leave behind, what are the main values that are embedded in how you want that business to run, and making sure that you're baking that in when you start that scaling process. Because I really think if I could go back to the beginning and plan out how things would look and take kind of smaller steps and more steps that have more care put into them, I would have come across fewer problems down the road. We all talk about putting our money where our mouth is, but it's like when you're doing everything at once, it feels like, well, you just have to put it out the next fire. You just have to make the next easy decision, and really doing that values-based work and coming back to like, why am I doing this? Who is impacted? What are the voices that are being heard? Who is being uplifted by this work? For me, that was a really integral process to make sure that I was coming back to. Okay, so this was kind of my preamble. I'm going to take a pause here. I also talk relatively fast. So if you feel like you want to expand on any of the stuff that I was just talking about, also, I would love to know more about what fields you guys are in and what types of spaces you're working in or where you are, so that if I can tailor this a little bit more to where you're at, I can do so. Because some of this might not be relevant at all. So feel free to let me know if what's hitting home. You know, if you're like, I never want to have employees, like this is super irrelevant, that's also fine. You can let me know. Yeah, and I'm just curious, like what you guys, what the projects are that you're working on, what the businesses are that you're starting.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my name's Remy, and I'm just starting a business in the equestrian industry, which is also extremely rooted in taking advantage of people's labor and time, and also of animals too. So there's the animal aspect of that. So this is just really interesting to me because this is something I'm always constantly thinking about. I don't have employees, and it will be a few years if I ever end up getting, like someone to do bookkeeping.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I'm just constantly thinking for my clients and everybody that I'm working with, how do I make sure that I'm taking into account all of these types of values, especially because there's such a history of it in this industry.
Yeah, definitely. I hear that. That's definitely one where it's like baked in from the beginning. So yeah, I'm thinking of like the ways in which that you are like communicating and affecting other people in your industry. Like, are there spaces where you can like bring up topics of like, are we doing the best we can to like protect the people and the animals in the spaces we're working in? Like, I don't know how much you connect and overlap with other people in your field. But maybe just starting to open up those conversations. And yeah, like I said, I think like having a really good idea of what's important to you right from the beginning, so that when you come to those decision trees down the road, it becomes a lot more clear. Well, of course I need to take this path because I'm so solid on like, what do I want this to look like? How do I want this to be in the world, to make the world that I want to see? And I think once you kind of go down to those like foundational decision-making tools, yeah, once you get to start making those like challenging decisions of like, yeah, as you're building the business, it's going to help clarify it a lot and take a lot of the stress off of your plate. But if you have any other like specific concerns about what it's like for you in building that, feel free to also jump in with those. Did anyone else have anything about the field they're working in?
Yeah. I raised my hand, but I'm not sure if that helped or not.
Oh, sorry. I don't think I can see that. Sorry. Feel just
That's all right. I will not do the hand stuff then. Hey, my name is Javelin. My pronouns are they, them. I am a ADHD coach, and I specialize in working with neurodivergent humans. Do a lot of these like values audits and explorations within that context, because building systems for our brains often require that we build them off of values that actually mean something to us, and those don't always line up with the sort of societally expected values. So I'm pretty familiar with this like values exploration and the importance of it, and I've got some clear ideas about how that applies to my coaching business. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to how you navigate the moments and the ongoing pressure and expectation to compromise those values in pursuit of economic growth or what have you. I'm thinking specifically of like an ethical thing that I have about not wanting to have my clients go into debt to pay for my services. And so I'm uncomfortable with taking like credit card payments and that kind of thing. So but that can make things more challenging, or can actually narrow my audience as well to some degree. So yeah, that's something that I've been wrestling with for a little while now.
I hear that so much. I think about this a lot in my business and my brand, and it's just really challenging. It's just, and especially right now, it's really hard where like, the cost of living is way higher and people have less money. It's just hard across the board. I think one thing that helps me is remembering that like people want your business to survive. People want your business to be in the world, and listening to the feedback that you have about people like celebrating what you're offering, because it's true, like we don't want to prey on people who might want this product, who might suffer down the road from spending money that they might not have on it, or that sort of thing. But at the same time, there's also going to be another side of it where people really want to support you and want you to do well. And so there's lots of different ways of doing like tiered payments. And I don't know if that's something that is on your mind or that you want to get into, but I kind of think about it as like the people who are able to pay, or maybe pay more or pay upfront, want your business to do really well so that you can start to support other people who have less access. Like for me, for example, like the people who buy things full price off my website, the clothing is going to be priced higher than like buying off of Amazon. And and people who buy ethical clothing, they know that, and they have the money to do so. And they also know that in buying those products, they're funding a program that gets those products to people for free. So it's like people are buying into the value set that you tell them about. And that's how you're going to want to price, and how people are going to want to spend their money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
like
heard someone recently, sorry. I just someone spoke recently. I don't even remember who it was. It might have been on a podcast about social justice pricing, and having a tier of pricing that is higher than what my like hourly rate actually is, with the idea of it subsidizing folks who are on the like sliding scale thing, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was just gonna say, is like you kind of need to build that in if you're building a social platform, excuse me, that allows for a range of income levels and accessibility points. And I have some examples that I can give you later of people who I really like the way that they've structured different pay scales in different fields. But I mean, it's something that I talk with my friends a lot about, because we're always changing, these pay scales. And like, for me, it's pretty fixed because someone, it's like an e-commerce site, but I have other people in my life who do work more like you, who are more freelancers, who are always trying to develop a way of having a sliding scale that feels ethical. And it's like, there's 1,000 different ways of doing it. But I find it really, really helpful to remember that there are people who want to pay the top end of the scale, because I think we forget that, who know why they're paying the top end of the scale, or buying a product that feels expensive because they're buying into those values, because they care in the same way that you do. And connecting to that audience is going to be your job in marketing.
Yeah. Cool.
Which is challenging. It's really hard. Yeah, I feel you on this one for sure. Okay, maybe let's see if anyone else has any questions on this kind of foundational stuff, and we'll go more into gender diversity specifically. I'm all about the sliding scale method. Yeah, okay. Let me pull up this message real quick. Yeah, I feel like it kind of balances itself if I can charge full price for the orgs with a budget for my services, and can offer discounts to small ones. Yeah, payment plans. Sorry, I'm just seeing the chat now. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, I see the chat too. So sorry to interrupt, but for some reason I can't type in the chat.
Okay.
This happened to me last time as well. Carla, yeah, I do mostly do payment plans. I'm also kind of uncomfortable with the like paying the large chunk up front, like pay ahead of time model that a lot of coaching services have. So I prefer to run more similar to a counseling service, where you pay per session. And then I get the e-transfer prior to the beginning of that session on the day. And then if the e-transfer doesn't come through, then I don't start the session, kind of a thing. So that protects me from, doing the work without and having to chase people. But
yeah,
I
think that makes a lot of sense. Another thing you might have thought about already is something like Sezzle or ForPay, where people can like pay over time without interest. I don't know if that's a system that might work for you.
I haven't heard of those, so I will look into them.
Oh yeah, okay. We started using something recently called Sezzle, which when I looked into it, felt like the most like ethical, and it's also more Canadian based, where people can pay in 4 payments, starting with the first one when they purchase the item, but they don't have any interest on that. And we take a small, or they take a small percentage of the fee from us, but it allows people to spread out their payments over time without any additional fees. And I find it to be helpful. Our customers have really liked it so far. We've had good feedback.
I have a question, and I know the raising of the hand thing wasn't necessarily working, so
Sorry.
I guess I'm wondering, because I was thinking that exact same thing, and I've done that in the past where I say, I do diversity and inclusion consulting. So
Okay,
if
great.
a nonprofit wants a workshop, I try and schedule it far enough in advance that they can do kind of a deposit to hold that date at the beginning, and then they can make payments so that it's either mostly paid off or all paid off by the time that day comes and we actually do the event. So maybe something like that helps out as well, if they can bump it a little bit forward and give themselves that kind of cushion to make the payments before, but it doesn't always work out. So I was putting a bunch of stuff in the chat, but I struggle with this as well, because if it was up to me, I wouldn't even charge for my services, because I want to work with the small teams that don't know where to start or don't have the budget. So it's such a challenge, and it comes back to that original question, like, do I go and do work for a big organization who doesn't care and it's just a checkbox so that I can pay my bills?
Yeah. I'm
So
assuming
it's
it comes
tough.
down to kind of the balance of like, you
Yeah,
need the big fish so that you can do the pro bono stuff.
exactly.
Yeah, I feel that.
And I just thought I'd chime in, not that anyone asked. Something that I have experienced within kind of the field of therapy and sessions kind of in that realm. I do have a lot of working colleagues that are actively working in that field, is some of them do have, amongst their first day meeting sheets where kind of people can outline some of their do's and don'ts or pronouns and preferences and their appointments. Having that section of, you could word it in any way. It could be taking off boxes, or it could be a free write space where they kind of write where they're at financially, because something I think, especially I'm Indigenous, so in the Indigenous community as well as the queer community, something that we need to remember is we are destigmatizing our ability to talk about money and our financial situations when people are comfortable to talk about it. Of course, there will people that will check off the no, I don't want to talk about it box, and that's okay. But I think putting that in your sheet of getting to know someone's sheets, I do that when I do consulting for Indigenous, companies looking for Indigenous people to come in and do some working around. I always put on the sheet, I have a sliding scale on mine. So it's it goes from $0 up depending on the service. And you can kind of put a little circle and your number of where you are on the scale. And so that's something to think about implementing. Sometimes, when you are doing, of course, like things like therapy could be totally different, but it is something to think about adding. And then having that little box that says, I'm not comfortable talking about it, then kind of weighs out that thought of, oh, I don't want to offend anybody or I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. Then at least they do have that option to kind of opt out of it. But it is a thought to thunk, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think that's fantastic. Someone else said that, yeah, that's going to really lead to trust and honesty right from the beginning. And I think it's like a fantastic way of integrating that into your practice. It's a really good example. Thank you. Cool. I will wait and see if anyone else wanted to chime in before going into more gender diverse specific niche content. Cool, let's do it. Okay. So I've broken this down into 3 different sections about my experience working specifically with trans and gender diverse people, general, names, and then language use. And it's great because I think that like some of you are already kind of in this field a little bit. So I'm really excited about this. Okay. So these are some actionable items and things that I've picked up from the way that I've integrated what we can call diversity and inclusion, but just like over my experience, and also tips that I've heard from other businesses who are dissimilar to mine in ways that they've been able to also integrate protocol, I guess, for people of varying trans identities. So if you're someone who works with clients and customers, if you're shipping things, obviously use discrete packaging. One thing we look for is pronoun usage, and really like kind of being aware of cues that we're getting about how people want to be communicated with. And I talk about this in names as well. Obviously, it's really going to be better if you can collect that data, like Dorian was saying, like opting for people to give you more information from the beginning is just going to build that trust. So if you can ask people to include their pronouns in their email signature, or that's something that you could do as well, including your pronouns in your email signature, but building that into things like contact forms where it might not be like a required field, but they're thinking about it. So even people that aren't gender diverse are saying like, okay, this is being normalized by this company and it's important to the company. Again, like flagging your own values, right? These are some other language use things like not using a gendered salutation. I hate getting those emails that are like, hello, Mr./Mrs. And I'm like, really? Like, we have better ways of doing this. I find this as well too. This is really kind of specific, but I don't know if any of you are using mailers, like email mailers, that now you can automate like someone's name into the mailer. I've actually come across a lot of issues with this because with AI now, they make it really easy for you to automatically enter someone's name in some of the communications that you're sending them. But often people aren't using the name that they would prefer to use for like a shipping address, for example. So this is something that yeah, I've had to kind of find workarounds for. So you might be dead naming people without meaning to. So it's just something to keep an eye on if you're doing mailers. Like, are you making sure that this is like, that everyone's okay using the name like some that they would use to like buy a product in the way that you're communicating with them in a way that you want to build trust through like a communication, like a mailer. For some websites, Quick Exit is a really fantastic tool that you could add if you feel like you have sensitive content that someone might not want someone to see them looking at. I don't use it personally, but a lot of people in my field do. Names specifically, here's some other notes about that. Believe people when they tell you their name. I don't know how many times like someone signed off an email, and then in response, a company will use like the name that's like in the email address itself. And you're like, someone literally just told you their name when they like wrote you a message, and then you're reverting back to something. So just like really paying attention to like how people want to be communicated, and not making assumptions about that. Another thing that might flag that someone is like wanting some more sensitivity around the names that they're using, is people using an initial. Often we find this on like when things are being shipped out, they might use a first initial or a last initial in their shipping address. So just like being mindful. Yeah, and again, like building in pronoun usage along forms and platforms. I think like the more that we can normalize that, regardless of the field you're in, the better. And keeping in mind neutral honorifics or not using any at all. Like I said, like Mr. and Mrs. is like quite outdated. I don't love it, and we don't really need it. There's so many other good options. I use folks all the time. I just like say folks, and I feel like depending on the level of professionality in which you need to communicate with your audience, there are other I don't want to say like more elevated status ways of speaking to people, but there's just so many new options now that don't revolve around us using gender binary terms. Someone is typing, so I will wait to see what you have to say, Remy. Or maybe I'll go through this one first as I wait for you there. Yeah, so this is going a little bit more into like how you might describe things on a website, for example. I know that, yeah, folks is automatically that they're cool. Yeah, we are cool. Thank you. These are some examples from other fields. So this is a great one, like men's and women's washrooms, right? Like we're moving more towards gender neutral washrooms. So what do we mean when we say a men's and women's washroom is essentially that one has a toilet and one has a urinal. But we can look at like, why does that binary exist and what are the meaning behind the symbols and the words for it? And taking that as an example, I'm sure that in your specific fields, there are a lot of things like that that we take for granted as to like, what do we actually mean when we say these terms? So for me, example, in fashion, there's always a men's and women's categories when you shop on a website that offers men's and women's garments. But like, what does that mean? What are you looking for when you go into those categories? Is it like there's a specific cut, there's a specific sizing system? There's like room for someone with like a penis when you're looking at like bottoms, like what? I think it's just really important to like go down to those basics of like what is embedded in the language that you're using, and not kind of just going with the status quo. Obviously, this is going to be different for everyone working in different fields. So yeah, like I said, in mine, it's like, what are your assumptions of what a man's or woman's body look like? And then for me, it's like, does your product interact with someone's sex organs? If not, like, why does it really matter to gender and object? And then if it is, there's probably a lot more specifications that you can talk about. And I'll get into more about like how I just design underwear with this in mind in a second. Oh, it's right here. Great. So I make lingerie, right? And we talk a lot about people's assigned gender at birth when people are buying underwear. Obviously, it touches your genitalia. We talk about what's in people's pants all the time. That's my job. So I was thinking about ways in which I could deconstruct how things were sold. So we didn't have to talk about a men's or a women's garment, or even more specifically in my field, like what it's like to put something on a trans body. And so I decided I was going to make underwear that would fit across the board for anybody. And so I was already making like custom sized garments, and then we added in something else that allows people to select the gusset, which is basically like the strip of fabric that goes like between your legs and a pair of underwear, so that they could customize that so that it would also fit their body in that way based on how they wanted it to feel on their body and if their body was changing. And so for me, it was a process of like, what questions do I need to be asking to fill the need of the people who are shopping, and how are they going to find my item? You know, because if trans people go to a website and there's like a men's or a women's section, it's like, well, what does that mean if I'm a trans man or if I'm a trans woman? Like, where do I need to shop? What are you trying to signal to me? So we can really break it down. So now we're going to talk a little bit about diversity in marketing. Some of the important questions that I'm asking myself all the time: who is being represented, from what groups or identities, who are we speaking to? Have we built that audience, or has it been created for us? We see this a lot of times now with like social media. Are we in an echo chamber? Are these the people I want to be talking to? Or is this algorithm just like throwing strangers at me that just found me? You know, are they my people? How it's going to land with our identified audience? You know, how are we being perceived, right, in the ways that we're talking about our work and our products? Does everybody have consent to be seen in these spaces? This is always something I get into trouble with like the photography and the marketing that I do getting flagged. People hate seeing trans people on the internet right now. We'll get more into that later. Do we know how our models want to be represented? What's affirming for their gender, and how they like to be talked about? You can also like substitute the word gender for whatever you're working with. How do the people that you are representing in the way that you're talking about your work want to be represented? So this is a really good example. I worked with one model, and after seeing the photos that I took of them, they didn't like the way that they looked at all. They didn't feel like their gender was affirmed. They were like, I feel terrible about my body. And so we had a conversation after that about the spaces they were okay with these photos being in, because it's always going to be really different, like a website versus social media, like how people interact in these spaces is always really different. And from this, we worked together to build a foundation and a protocol so that now every time we work with an individual, whether it be a model or anything, we talk about, how do I want to feel in these photos when I see them, and also when they're being taken, what I want them to represent. Like, what is the product going out into the world? What, like we talked about, what are the values that this image is representing? The ways I like my body to be photographed, And the body, this is more trans specific, the body parts that I would like to be emphasized or de-emphasized. So we talk about, like dysphoria and euphoria in your body, how you want your photographer to work with you. This is getting a little bit niche. Not all of you might do this stuff. But I think that this example of going through that process with the people that you're working with is very replicable in different fields in different ways. We were getting feedback on like, I don't feel like the best representation, and this might even be for yourself. Do I feel like the version of me going out into the world is the best representation? Do I feel like the images I put out there to accelerate my brand are showcasing the things that I want people to see about me? And how do we know? Like, a visual representation of our value sets and our work is so tricky. Like, how do we communicate with that? So what I found really helpful is obviously finding your niche. So what I was just saying, like, how do we even know who we're talking to out there when it's like such an echo chamber? And I know like marketing and advertising is always such a monster, especially when you're starting out your brand, and it just feels like super overwhelming. So really focusing in on that niche is super important. Good branding, I think, thrives on specificity. I tried to make everything for everyone when I first started out. And as I started narrowing in, making it cohesive, and then cutting all the stuff that felt like fluff, everything just worked so much better. So really honing in on like, what do you know is like your foundation in your brand? And are you selling things just to try to appeal to a wider audience? Because that usually doesn't work super well. And also being really vulnerable. Like this last point here, I say that I used to not talk about my transition and I didn't used to talk about being a trans person. And I was told all the time that my copy used to read as very like for trans people by cis people, until I was like, oh, whoa, this is not how I want to be seen. This is not the language I want to be using. And I realized I just wasn't being vulnerable enough to put myself out there because I was scared of criticism. But it's super valuable. And I think especially right now, it cuts through all the bullshit of like being advertised to. People don't want to be sold by a megacorp every 2 seconds when they're on the internet. And the way to really cut through all of that noise is to be a bit messy and a bit rough and be really authentic and vulnerable in the way that you're talking to your audience. I'm going to skip through a couple of my examples because I'm noticing the time, and I know some of you might want to leave a bit early, or like on time. I have a few more slides left. Actually, maybe before we go into more specifics, I'll pause for some more questions here and see how this stuff is landing before going through. So if anything's coming up at this point, let me know. Is this relating to the industries that you guys are in? Do you have any questions more specifically about, working with gender diverse people specifically, even if that's not your niche, like how to make sure that you're being inclusive in that way, finding your niche?
I have a question.
Go for it.
All right. Being a trans person who's just recently come out, I'm struggling with at 50. So
congratulations.
Thanks. I'm struggling a little bit with showing up with just as who I am. Like, I just want to be me. And the difference between that and like actually saying like, I'm trans and putting the label on that.
Yeah, I hear you.
Right? Like, I want people to just, when I don't say I'm trans and I connect with people, I can connect with all kinds of people, including trans people, but I don't know how important it is for me to like say that label.
Yeah.
To just like
pigeonhole yourself.
Be myself.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on what your goals are. Like, I don't know what field you're working in, but like, are you speaking, are you doing marketing specifically? Or are you talking more about like networking?
I think it's both. So my business is Living in Possibilities, and I basically do transformational coaching. Specifically, I want to work with the trans queer community and the neurodivergent community. So like, that's kind of my areas of expertise. So it's I feel like it's important to make that connection.
Yeah.
But I don't know how important it is to, like, I don't know, labeling it just feels weird to me. And I don't know if that's just my discomfort or.
I get that. I've definitely asked myself this so many times. Yeah, like I said, when I started my brand, it wasn't specifically for gender diverse people. It was like for everyone. And also I make things for trans people. But like, I think what I found is that the people who found me were finding me because it was very value-based. And those people happened to mostly be trans people, because I think people who don't need the specificity or maybe your specific like lived experience and expertise have more options out there. And I do think that being vulnerable, like, you'll either find trans people who need you, or you'll find other people who have value overlap that will see you working with neurodivergent and gender diverse people and go, oh, that's also important for me, even though I don't fall under that umbrella. And so while you don't need to necessarily like pigeonhole yourself and say that like this brand is only for this specific type of people, I think like you want to find other people for who that else is also important. And I think that'll serve you in the long run, in my experience at least. It really, really did change for me when I started talking more from my own point of view and my own experience, and saying that like, yeah, everyone can buy underwear from me, but that's not why I make underwear. I make underwear because trans people need underwear. And if other people want to buy it, that's great. But I'm not going to hold back and like kind of tiptoe around that. Like, I'm going to use trans people in my imagery. I'm going to talk about my experience being trans. I'm going to talk about trans experience on my blog. And then like the other people that are finding me are like, cool, rad. I'm an ally and I want to support this brand because I know that it's also doing the good work. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Can I ask a secondary question then?
Yeah, of course.
Like, just as I was listening to you talk a little bit earlier, the whole values based, then even when it comes to marketing, like I struggle with traditional marketing, and it, I was listening to you talk and then wondering how important it is for me to include, other trans businesses or other queer businesses as I, look for help. And I guess that's just part of the value based, right? Like that's part of my values, and to reach out to those businesses instead of just anywhere or the cheapest place or the easiest place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real balance, right? Like we talked about before, it's like you still have a bottom line and we still want your business to thrive, which might not mean always making the most ethical decision. Like, do I buy things from Amazon every once in a while? Hell yeah, because it's like I need that thing to be cheap if I want to stay afloat. It's always going to be like a checks and balances. You're doing something with your heart, and I think people are going to see that no matter what. And also, like, yeah, you still have to exist in this world. And it's, I don't think that every decision always has to be like as values based as the next one. It's that's like a personal, it's always going to come down to your personal ethics.
Yeah,
obviously seeing what other people are doing in the world. Yeah. And I think also a note about that is like you can connect with also like really amazing other companies doing good work without necessarily like hiring them. I think when I started talking to other people who were in my field doing similar work, I started being like, hey, I would love to hire you, but I don't have the money yet. But like, I love what you're doing. And you start realizing that everyone's kind of on the same page. And if you have the same values overlap, they're going to want to help you. Like maybe they'll give you like a shout out post on Instagram, or like give you a blog link, or like, I think like there's still a lot of ways that we can support each other without having to be like, I'm not at the point where I can hire your services, even though I really want to, and this is where I want to be going. People are still going to be like, you're trying and you care, and I see that.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, good luck. I'm happy to connect you with resources as well if I have any. I'm just gonna read this comment. In my personal experience, My labels have evolved and fluctuated over time. At the beginning, transitioning at 30, I was afraid of labels, and over time I found my people and really liked labels to find others I could connect with and relate to. Yeah, that's lovely. Now I'm like, man, labels aren't so set on labels or need to identify as this or that. I can be authentic. If someone wants to label me, fine, but I've grown to be not so strict to staying to a single identity. Long story short, it took me a long time to realize it didn't have to be this or be that, but it was okay to just be. That's really sweet. Thank you for sharing that. This is a really lovely chat. No, I mean, it's corny, but it's true. It's so true. That's like, yeah, I definitely feel myself going the same direction. That's amazing. Yeah. Oh, everyone's doing such good work here. I really love it. You guys really care. You're going to create amazing businesses. So for people to have to hop off right at 1, feel free. I'm going to go through a few more like specific stuff. You guys will also have access to the slides afterwards. There's some more examples, so feel free to like read those as well if we don't get time today. So yeah, let's go into a little bit more about like how to know what you want to specialize in. So I think, yeah, when we're starting, like I said, it's really easy to like aim big and be like, everyone will need this thing. So let's think about how we can gather feedback. There's really great resources for that, obviously, around us in our existing networks. Reddit is fantastic. See who is already doing the work that you want to be doing, like we were just saying, like, and you can also directly crowdsource the information that you need by doing a survey. I've seen a lot of, specifically in my field of gender diverse organizations, people who are like, we're going to put out a paid survey and see what people need. Awesome idea. So many online resources. I will also give you some of my own resources after this. So quickly, one of the examples that I use is that like I said, I didn't start off doing gender diverse specific stuff. I was doing it for everybody. And then when I moved back, I was living in Central America for most of my 20s. And when I moved back to Canada, I saw my friends who were like DIYing their own gender affirming stuff. And I was like, I have a skill set for this. There's a need in my community. So I guess the point of the story is like looking around and seeing where the needs are already trying to be met, but maybe with not enough like support, and being like, am I the person that can fill that gap? There are already probably so many people trying to do what you're trying to do. So like, yeah, searching for other businesses or other, yeah, DIYers or individuals like trying to work in the same field, either collaborating with them or just being like, okay, what worked for you? What didn't work for you? Cool. So, oh my God, I did so well. There's a whole section at the end about the internet and how it's really fucked up to try to advertise on the internet right now with current bans and censorship. But I think I will end here for today, unless anyone wants to stick around, in which case I'm happy to go into that. But it's like a whole can of worms and might not be relevant for everyone.
I'm interested in opening the can of worms.
Okay, cool. I'm happy to stick around and we can talk internet. Yeah, never mind the risk of DIYing chest binders for breathing issues. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, this is, yeah, it's awful. It's terrible. It's something I deal with all the time. My chest binders are all flexible, so you can sing and breathe, just FYI. So I was like, oh, ace bandages, never again. We're not doing it anymore. Cool. Well, if anyone needs to leave, feel free, but I'm just going to dive in. Because I'm also like really mad about this stuff. And I'm like, if anyone can glean information off of what I am going through, that'll make me feel great. So yeah, in the field that I'm in, something we're coming across a lot lately is censorship and algorithms. Like obviously with me, it's the rhetoric of trans bodies, the politicization of trans bodies. Most of my clientele's in the States, and obviously with the bans on trans healthcare, et cetera, general dumpster fire, which is trans healthcare right now. It's become really, really challenging. And specifically, there's been some changes to Google and Meta, in my case, which have changed the status of like advertising to transgender people to make it really, really challenging for even people to see your work, my work, anyone's work, and also to advertise. So that's something that I'm trying to circumnavigate. Yeah, as we know, algorithms on social media platforms play into what gets shown to who, and they're often embedded with value sets from the people who create those algorithms, the culture, the time and place where they're created. They're obviously working for companies that are trying to turn a profit. So non-typical, racialized, gender diverse, and other folks might get deprioritized or flagged more often. Obviously, we see this all the time. Sexualized content gets flagged more frequently. And I find this especially with trans and gender diverse models. And the thing that drives me crazy is it's almost always my trans femme models that get flagged for sexuality when they're being shown in their underwear, advertising underwear, more than my trans masc models, which just irks me so much. So my personal experience with this is September last year, I lost 40% of my sales because Google started banning trans-related keywords and they blocked all of my ads. So I went overnight from having my Google ads bring in about 40% of my sales to nothing with no explanation of why. So I had to get loans to stay open. It's been a year of trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. Is this going back? Is it not? How do we find other platforms? How do we advertise? Do we even want to? So yeah, I mean, some of my competitors who had learned to hack the system before I did, saying things like, I don't know, chest compression vest instead of binder, and all of these like weird workarounds, have found ways. But it also takes a lot of time and money and trial and error to work past these barriers. So I'm in the process of trying to use things that will work around this. Like, for example, Reddit is a space where I'm trying to advertise, which doesn't have those same flags. Yeah. So how do we use social media to our advantage? I find other creators who are doing similar work and then literally just study what they're doing and what's working and what posts do well and where they're advertising, and sign up for their newsletters. Oh my God, that's such a good tool. Get the newsletters of your competitors. I do a lot of collaborating with influencers who are not influencers. And by that, I mean, I reach out to people who are doing work, again, that aligns with my values, because I know that those values are how people are finding me. And those are the clients that I want to get and who will stay. So people right now, they don't want to be sold to. They don't want another ad. They don't want another, like, this week free, last chance, blah, blah, blah. Like, that means nothing. We've seen 8 million of those already this week. Like, they want to know, like, why you're doing what you're doing, why it's important. People will put their money down right now for things that align with their ethics and their values more than ever before. And so for me, this means a lot of like unedited content, raw and unfiltered stuff. Like I said, being really vulnerable about my own experience. There's also going to be 1,000 people who tell you what a good strategy is to advertise. The strategy that works is the one that works for you and your audience. So there's no magic to posting schedules or hacking the algorithm, like, and it changes all the time. You would have to, like, unless you have the money to hire someone whose full-time job is to advertise for you, do what feels right and natural and in your own voice, and build up that brand voice so people know what to expect and they follow you as the person behind the brand. We're not talking about running a multi-million-dollar company for most of us. These are brands that are built with like your visions, and it's based on you as a person. Like, people want to see that person. And you're also never going to make anyone happy. So if you do get like flack and feedback on what you're posting, it's fine. It's fine. It's very hard to weather the storm when people have negative feedback online. There's trolls everywhere. And as we know, like, especially working in niche audiences, yeah, people are awful. Try to have a thick skin. I can't really tell you how to do that because I do not. It's been hard. So things that have
Ray, before you go on to the next slide, there was some convo in the chat relative to the algorithm discussion. If you wanted to,
thank you. I missed that. Let me go back and read that. Thank you. Okay, so what haven't I seen here? Yeah, it's never been more important to focus on your owned media channels and properties. Yes, absolutely. I talk about mailers in a second. It's awesome. Owned media, maybe someone has some other examples, but it's essentially getting you off of platforms that are just trying to make a buck. So it's like your own website you own, a mailing list you own. I'm trying to think of some other examples that aren't like physical in person. Like obviously if you do like physical like flyers and pamphlets in person. Maybe someone can drop other examples in the chat. Some examples. Sometimes getting negative comments means you're in the right place where you need to be. I have a friend who's an author, and when his books get banned, he celebrates. I love that. Yeah, I get banned on TikTok all the time. And it's like, and then I make a TikTok about it, and those blow up. It's like, okay, we're doing what we need to do. Yeah, those are super important. I'll try to keep an eye on this chat better as I go through this as well. See what you guys are saying. Yeah, so I mean, I keep going back to radical vulnerability, but I really think at the heart, that's what resonates with people right now. And if you've found good followers who are under the same umbrella of values as you, ask them for their help and advice. Like, I don't know how the amount of times where I've been able to put an Instagram post up just being like, things are so hard. Like, what do other people do about this? You know, can you like ask people to like I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience where you get a post taken down on Instagram, but you can ask people to go and like appeal that decision. So like really leaning on your network, because you know if you're doing this with heart, then you've built up other people who also care around you. Yeah, mailers. So owned content. Sometimes is LinkedIn a safe bet? I don't use LinkedIn a lot for my work necessarily. If someone else has had experiences with LinkedIn, feel free to chime in. I think that because you're not advertising there, yeah, I think like it's safe in terms of like you're not going to necessarily get flagged, I believe. Kind of depends on what you're using it for. Owned media is the properties you control. So your website, your newsletter, events. Yeah, that's right. In-person events, absolutely. That's one thing that's really been instrumental for me. Direct mail, yeah, print media, depending on your sector, absolutely. So thank you for that.
I can give a little bit of input into LinkedIn. I've worked in healthcare corporate fields for a really long time in Alberta. So a very conservative environment. You can't really do advertising per se, but something that you can do that can kind of make clear where you stand as a professional is the kind of pages that you follow. So I follow all of our like LGBTQ and like, you know, healthcare that promotes my people, and I make sure that I'm linked with them on LinkedIn so that people can actively see that my business supports those things. And if they don't align with those things, then I am not the person to be reaching out to for whatever you're reaching out to me for. And so I guess it's not so much an advertising thing, but it can be used as kind of like a self-advertising of like,
I mean, that's
I
definitely a
want
way
to be linked with these things. I want to be seen as this kind of a person or this kind of a business. And I think as you build, whether you're working with corporate entities or not, as you build your business, I think it is a good idea to have a LinkedIn for your business, but also a LinkedIn for yourself, so that people can look up you and what you do. But your business is also something that you don't have to always identify yourself as your business. You're still a human being that has a personal life that can have a LinkedIn and say, you know, I go to Calgary Pride, I go to Banff Pride, I do these things, while your business can be linked to, you know, some of the colleagues that you're reaching out to in your business life. So I think LinkedIn is a good thing to have, especially if any of you are doing like any sort of consulting, or especially the ones of you that are doing coaching, I think LinkedIn's are really important. It allows you to showcase your kind of history in your sector without it being like a resume, because obviously we're not emailing everyone our resumes, but it does give you a place to kind of showcase your personal achievements. That's kind of why I say to kind of have both, is because it's important to recognize the good things you did on a personal level, like, I got this award or I did this, and then you can also highlight your business on your business LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's really good tips. Thank you for sharing that. That's super helpful. And it's like we were saying, it's marketing. I mean, it's not marketing, but it's value flagging. So like we were talking about before with
Oh, we lost Rae.
We've lost them.
I think it's because sometimes LinkedIn, we're on the topic of LinkedIn, Zoom like has like a time limit sometimes. If you create certain Zoom and you don't have like a specific time limit, sometimes it like times people out.
It's so strange because it should be open-ended. Like we had it go to 2, but oh, there's Rae. You're back.
We're back.
We lost you.
Sorry for a second.
We were all so scared and lost without you.
You guys are having a great conversation without me. No, it was really, really helpful information, Dorian. I was going to say how it kind of linked into what we were saying before about like finding your people by like kind of flagging what you do, but still leaving it open to like finding a broader audience also, but hoping that that audience that you're getting is still like values aligned, even if they're not like within that community umbrella, right? It's harkening back.
Rae, I'd love to add some stuff about LinkedIn if we have
Please.
a minute.
Yeah, go for it. This is
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm actually really active on LinkedIn. And so I'd really recommend everybody consider the difference between sort of the brand for your company and your personal brand. As an entrepreneur, I always recommend that you're working on your personal brand. And I think that that's what I also mean by owned media channels, is that if you have a brand, much like Rae has shared today about their brand and how they're, that's an industry that's getting flagged a lot. I work in cannabis, another industry that gets flagged a lot by meta platforms. But on LinkedIn, it's currently not a whole different world, but it definitely is. They have a different algorithm and a different approach to the business aspect. Meta is just there because you are the product on Meta, right? It's your eyeballs that they are selling to the world. You are the product. LinkedIn, while they certainly have an advertising platform and they certainly make money on the platform, they build themselves as a networking platform, not a social media platform. And so by doing so, they have instituted slightly different algorithms that allow more conversation around some of these what I'm going to call vice businesses, right? We often get put into these areas, even though it's not sexual or it's not drugs. We're put into those areas because of the nature of what we sell or the nature of, the conversations we're trying to have with people. So we have seen that LinkedIn is a place that if you find yourself in some of those niches that are getting flagged most often on Meta, that you will have maybe more often a chance to run ads. LinkedIn has a full ad spectrum. So if you are a B2B company, I would lean into LinkedIn versus Facebook every day of the week. Absolutely. But even if you're a consumer brand, I'd really recommend, especially if you're new, building in public is a really popular and exciting thing to do on LinkedIn. So talk about how you're building your business. Talk about the things that you're running into every day. Share the experience of being an entrepreneur in the world, and you will find that your people will find you. People who want to collaborate with you, people who want to support your business, but also your customers. We're all customers no matter where we are, right? When you're on your LinkedIn, you are the same person as when you open up your Facebook, as when you open up your Instagram. And so to remember that people don't stop shopping for soap and lingerie on LinkedIn. They're still shopping in their minds for those things, even though they're on a quote business platform. We're always shopping 24 hours, as we're always consumers wherever we show up, is I guess my point. But definitely if you're in B2B, I would say LinkedIn is your primary quote social media platform to be in, certainly over the meta platforms. If you are looking to run ads and if you are in an industry that they typically flag most often, I would really see LinkedIn as a really valuable space to build. And then on top of that, again, yes, have a company page, but the LinkedIn's own data shows that company pages really get very little traffic. So make sure you're reaching to your own personal page and that you are spending time just posting, natively to your own personal page as well, because you will find that you'll get many more followers and traction. People follow people. They don't really follow businesses.
That's really,
yeah, my shares there.
Yeah, that's so much information. Thank you so much. This is a niche that I've not really explored, so this is like fantastic for me as well. Thank you so much for your expertise in that area. Yeah, I like everyone's like writing notes. I'm like, oh, me too. Go to my LinkedIn. Yeah, definitely. Did anyone? Okay, what did I miss here? Indigenous owned business called Cheekbone Beauty does a good job of tailoring their content depending on their platform. Yeah, for example, the CEO talks about business related stuff on LinkedIn along with news about product launches, etc. That's awesome. That's a really good example too. I know that brand and I think they're doing amazing work. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, for me, seeing brands that do that, that are talking about what's really going on behind the scenes. Also, I think that like lifting the veil is something that people want to see more and more. For me, that means like, how are things made? Who are the people making them? Like, what are the struggles we go through, the behind the scenes everyday stuff? And I'm sure that in every industry, people have some version of this, right? Because everything now is like shiny studio photos, like retouched, and they just see the same thing over and over, and it's like, I don't think that that's actually really like hitting home anymore. Yeah, they want to see the why and the how. I think when we can give them that valuable information, places like LinkedIn is obviously really successful in talking about, yeah, more of the development process of the brand. Super, super helpful. Okay, so we touched a little bit on mailers and owned content. I find that was an incredible place to do what we just talked about as well. Talk about my experience in the industry. Someone mentioned in-person events as well. That's really something that I've been going more towards, hosting regular events in Montreal for my community. I do a lot of like community day type stuff where we like offer supplies and resources and meet and greets and stuff like that. And what was the other thing I was going to say that's really working? Oh, educational content. So that's the other thing is like, if you're struggling to get your product out there, what are other resources that the people who want your product will also want? For me, that's talking a lot about like how-to guides, especially because I work with like younger gender diverse folks. It's like, how do you tuck while swimming? How do you navigate like dating apps while you're trans? Like I've been doing a lot more educational content for free, going out on like blogs or my mailer and things like that. And I find that incredibly helpful because it's like retention, and those are people who are going to keep coming back to you even when they don't have the money right now. When they do have the money, they're going to be like, wow, I got a lot of value in other ways, and I really am like in alignment with what this brand is doing. So that's really like long-term marketing strategies, like making stuff available for people even when they can't buy your product. That honestly is probably what saved me this year, to be totally honest. Yeah, and then also like, this is kind of what we're talking about too, like what are the platforms that work best for you? Finding out where your people are. So like, what's the age range? What are your people into? LinkedIn might not be the best place for everybody's audience. If you have a really young audience, they're not going to be on LinkedIn, if they're not professionals. Like, but if you have an audience who's like young trans people, they're all on TikTok. I'm terrible at TikTok. I had to hire someone to do my TikTok for me because I realized all the people that I wanted to be my customers were like 15 to 20. And I was like, I don't know how to talk to people on TikTok. But I realized that was where I was going to get my niche audience. So like, okay, I have to do it. So yeah, and then like also we only have a finite amount of time and resources for ourselves, right? So trying to do every platform, you're going to burn yourself out. Like it takes so much time to really go in depth and post regularly and update all of our everything and make the videos, make reels and caption everything. Focus on the ones that you know are going to be the people that you want to engage with. And don't worry about doing all of them. That's silly. You can push a lot of content from one to others and automate the ones that aren't really necessary for you until you'll still have like, a bit of a presence. People will see you there if they're looking for you, but you don't need to spend hours every day on every platform. Just focus in on the ones that are the people that are really listening. Yeah, and what are your strengths too? Like, do you shine when you're talking on video to your audience? Okay, so YouTube and TikTok are going to be great places for you. Maybe Instagram Reels. Are you an amazing writer? Okay, so focus on like a blog, your mailer, doing long form content, maybe a Substack, things like that. Figuring out what your best skills are. Or if you're looking at hiring someone, then someone who can come in with those particular skill sets. Like for me, like I can't edit reels to save my life. So it's like, it makes sense for me to outsource this particular skill because it's like bringing me the most value in my media toolkit. Whereas like, I can talk to people online like this and I can make content and it's fine, but it's like no one wants to just like see someone's face talking at the camera every day. You have to like make transitions and make it look pretty and edit things. So I was like, okay, what makes sense?
I'm just curious, Rae, where did you go about finding someone who will do your TikTok for you? Because everybody keeps telling me I need to do TikTok and I refuse. I refuse to do TikTok. It is so hard. I can barely do reels. I like suffer through doing freaking reels. So TikTok is like not not in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky. I had someone who I was working with already who had that skill set, who's now a part-time media manager for me, or maybe advertising manager is a better word for it. There are places like, I don't know if Fiverr specifically, but companies like that where you can get people to do kind of like one-of contracts. I know that it's hard to kind of know the validity, I guess, when you don't know the people. Honestly, if I was doing it again, I would find other people online who are doing similar work in your niche field and just be like, hey, like you already have an understanding of what we're going for in the audience. Like, can I pay you to do some extra work on the side? Like, there's got to be other people who who are like-minded collaborators who might want a little bit of side income, people who are already starting up. I've had a lot of people approach me who are also like interested in what I'm doing, saying, I'm starting a new brand. It's kind of similar. And those are the type of people that I would often say, like, I can give you advice, but also like, do you want to do some work for me on the side? There's probably a lot of overlap because you're speaking to the same audience. You're developing a rapport with the same audience. You have a similar voice. And that's something you can't teach people. They have to already know who the clientele is. Like for me, it's like if someone's not trans and they reach out to me to be like, I want to do XYZ with your socials and your website, I'm like, nah, because you're not going to get it and I can't teach you that. That might not be as niche for some of you, but starting with the ethics, like we were talking about, like the building blocks of like, does this person understand why we're doing it? And the rest can be taught. It's like maybe someone's like, yeah, okay, I can spend a day learning how to edit a reel. But if you know that their voice is going to represent you, like that is the most valuable thing. Let me see what I missed over in the chat here. Barter, yeah. Substack, yeah. Substack is a great writing platform. I've neither ticked nor talked. Oh God, everyone hates it so much. Barter your skills. Yeah, swap the things that you do well with someone who can do the things that you struggle with. More collaboration. Absolutely. UGC is a great cultivator for content for TikTok. Yes. User-generated content. So that's content that someone is already posting about you that you can then, with consent, repurpose, and use as your own content. Definitely. For me, that means often like sending out product to people in like an influencer style system. It works. Find someone with less than 10K followers that's making videos that you like and make them an offer. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if you know that if they're doing something that you want to be doing, maybe they want to make some extra cash. Absolutely. I think everyone's struggling right now. I don't know many people who would say no to an offer like that, especially the old white dude who doesn't understand technology. I mean, there is a lot to learn and things are changing all the time. And also, like maybe some of the stuff that we're talking about is not the spaces that are where you want to be advertising. If you want to advertise to people like you, maybe doing something like a blog, like long form content and a mailer is the right avenue. Yeah, and I don't know anything about like your audience or what's already working, but like there's no point learning how to do TikTok if your audience is not like young people with short attention spans. Then you're just wasting that time, right? Yeah, social media, it's kind of a nightmare right now. And it's sad because like we do spend a lot of time going and upping our skill set and learning it and going into it. Yeah, I know. Well, it's changing all the time too, which is so frustrating. I spend a lot less time on my social media than ever before. I do post, but it's not like in depth. I don't do a lot of editing. Besides making my TikTok videos, I really like my Facebook and Instagram is like pretty bare bones. But what I do focus on is like collaborative posts with other brands who are in my niche and want to do co-created educational content. I focus on my personal story. I focus on putting my face out there a lot so people see me and see the stuff that's behind the scenes. And I focus on networking, like messaging people that are commenting on whatever media I'm creating, looking at other brands that are doing similar work, commiserating over all the bands that are happening, sharing information.
I have a question on that, Rae.
Yeah.
You said, collaborating with folks that, maybe you like what they're already doing. Is there an etiquette about how to ask somebody that? Or is it just, hey, I love what you're doing. Do you want to work together? Because I feel when I do that, they're going to be like, I don't know you. Why would I want to do anything with you? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to come across as, look at me, I'm an expert. Let's do stuff together.
Yeah, totally. Cold calling is always really weird. I feel like there's two camps of this. There's the people who are like, hi, am I talking to the right person? Can you put me in touch with the media manager? And then they go into like a more formal channel of like, here's my email. Let me send you my proposition. So that's like one side of things. Or the people who just like chat and they're like, hey, I love this thing that you're doing. Like, do you ever have this problem? Like, do you maybe want to do a thing together? And it's very informal. And for me, I can't say like with all assuredness that the authenticity of the latter one makes a big difference. But I think I guess it depends on who you're going after. I think if it is a like-minded business, and it sounds like maybe you and I are kind of in a similar field, I find it very refreshing when people reach out to me with more of an informal tone these days, because I think we get sold to a lot. I don't know if anyone else is getting those like scammy emails that's like, I'm going to get you 10,000 followers on Instagram and I'm going to revamp your website and your SEO. And like, it's hard to distinguish a real voice from an email like that. So making it warm and friendly for me always kind of cuts through that noise. If I get a message from someone who's in my field, kind of just being like, hey, notice you're doing this. We're kind of doing this, thinking about doing some education around this or a post around this. Like, let me know if you'd be interested in being a part of it.
And I am certainly more informal than formal.
Yeah.
That's kind of my brand is, getting rid of the professionalism side of things and doing, focusing more on the person-centered side of things. So
yeah, and I think a lot of people are moving that direction, and I think it's probably a smart call for where you are situated.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Okay, well, on that note, I think if there's no other comments or questions, we'll wrap it up here. I'm happy to send out this presentation. I think we did last time through an email so that you guys have these notes. Also, I will include my email if you guys have any like specific questions or you're looking for resources or something really rang true or you have any comments. Also, I'd love feedback if you have any on it. Feel free to message me directly. Oh, thank you. I'm really glad you enjoyed it. I really, really enjoy giving these. I think it's valuable and it's always very well received. So thank you. Thank you for staying afterwards to discuss.
Yay. And I'll also send the recording out to everybody in case you want to go rewatch some of this fabulous stuff.
Right.
And I'll send a survey too. And Rae, I can share those results.
Yeah, that would be great.
Too.
Yeah, it's really helpful for me.
Awesome.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thank all of y'all for showing up. It was great to see you.
Yeah, thank you for spending your time here this afternoon. It was really good to meet all of you. Please go on Instagram and send me your businesses so that I can actually see what everyone is doing. I would love to connect with all of you or whatever platform you want. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, folks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.